Well, I started 3 years ago a trust in Scotland, Scottish International Education Trust.
They offered him millions, but he turned it all down. Sean Connery, the man who defined James Bond, walked away from the role forever after a secret battle that nearly destroyed him. The studios treated him like a disposable asset. The paparazzi hounded him relentlessly, and his fury reached a breaking point. He even donated his entire paycheck just to escape. And when they came crawling back with an eye-watering $5.5 million offer, he didn't just refuse, he slammed the door shut. But now, the real story behind his dramatic exit is finally coming to light. Born on August 25, 1930, in the working-class neighborhood of Fountainbridge, Edinburgh, Sean Connery entered the world as Thomas Sean Connery. Life was anything but glamorous. His father, Joseph, labored in a factory and drove trucks, while his mother, Euphemia, toiled as a laundress. Their home, a cramped two-room flat, had no indoor plumbing, and money was always tight. By the time he was 7, Connery was already working, delivering milk for St. Cuthbert's Cooperative Society. The early mornings and long hours toughened him up, forcing him to memorize every shortcut in Edinburgh. That street knowledge would serve him well in ways he never expected. Years later, a taxi driver tried to overcharge him. Instead of arguing, Connery calmly directed the cab through the city's fastest routes, leaving the driver stunned. His family's struggles only intensified when his younger brother Neil was born in 1938. Determined to help, Connery shouldered even more responsibility. His imposing height and muscular build earned him the nickname Big Tam, and at just 13, he left school to work full-time. Education took a back seat. His family needed money more than he needed books. At 16, he enlisted in the Royal Navy, dreaming of a long career in service. But fate had other plans. A mere 3 years in, he was discharged due to severe stomach ulcers, a condition that plagued his family. The Navy left its mark on him in more ways than one. He walked away with 2 tattoos, one dedicated to his parents, the other declaring his loyalty to Scotland. Back in Edinburgh, Connery faced a harsh reality. He needed to find work, and fast. He took on an array of odd jobs, polishing coffins, delivering coal, and working as a lifeguard at Portobello Open-Air Pool. He even posed as a nude model for art students at the Edinburgh College of Art. The jobs paid the bills, but Connery wanted more. At 21, he discovered bodybuilding and immersed himself in rigorous training at the Dunedin Weightlifting Club. Standing at an impressive 6 feet 2 inches, his physique was impossible to ignore. By 1953, at the age of 22, he traveled to London to compete in the Mr. Universe competition. He entered the tall man division, standing shoulder to shoulder with the best in the sport. But it wasn't just muscles that opened doors. A chance conversation backstage changed everything. Someone mentioned auditions for the musical South Pacific. Connery had no singing or dancing experience, but that didn't stop him. He auditioned, landed a small role in the chorus, and before long, his part expanded. By the time the show reached Edinburgh, he had been promoted to play Lieutenant Buzz Adams, with his pay jumping from 12 to 14 pounds per week. The money was a bonus, but what he gained was far more valuable: exposure. American actor Robert Henderson saw potential in him and took him under his wing. He handed Connery books by Shakespeare and Ibsen, broadening his cultural knowledge. He even convinced him to take elocution lessons to smooth out his thick Scottish accent, making him more marketable. While refining his craft, Connery earned a reputation as someone not to be messed with. One night in Edinburgh, 6 gang members tried to rob him. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Connery fought them off single-handedly. his sheer strength and fearlessness forcing them to back down. After that, they never dared approach him again. This toughness would later become an essential part of his on-screen persona. His acting career started small. His first credited film role came in 1957's No Road Back, where he played a gangster with a speech impediment. It wasn't a breakout role, but it got him noticed. To make ends meet, he took on side jobs, including babysitting for journalist Peter Noble. His big opportunity arrived in 1958 when he starred in Another Time, Another Place, opposite Hollywood legend Lana Turner. The film should have been a stepping stone to greater success, but what happened off-screen was even more dramatic than the movie itself. Turner's boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, a notorious gangster with ties to the Los Angeles mob, believed Turner was having an affair with Connery. One day, Stompanato stormed onto the set with a gun, ready to confront him. But Connery wasn't intimidated. With a swift move, he grabbed Stompanato's wrist, twisted it, and disarmed him in seconds. Security dragged the gangster away, and the incident made headlines. Some whispered that Connery had made enemies in the mob, forcing him to tread carefully in Hollywood. Despite the drama, the film didn't launch him to stardom. He continued taking small roles, including a live BBC television drama, Requiem for a Heavyweight, in 1957. The production was high risk. One mistake could ruin everything. Connery played a boxer at the end of his career, a role that demanded both strength and vulnerability. Critics took notice. His performance was hailed as one of the best of the night, proving he had the depth and presence to carry a role beyond just his looks. One of his co-stars in the production was a young Michael Caine. At the time, they were just two struggling actors, but their paths would cross again in one of Connery's most iconic films. He wasn't a household name yet, but he was about to land a role that would change cinema forever: James Bond. However, that journey was far from smooth. When he was cast in 1962's Dr. No, even Ian Fleming, the creator of Bond, had his doubts. Connery didn't fit the image he had in mind. He wasn't upper class, he wasn't polished, and he certainly didn't have the refined manners of the literary Bond. But when audiences saw him on screen, they didn't care about pedigree. They saw a man who embodied danger, charm, and irresistible charisma. Sean Connery wasn't just playing James Bond, he became James Bond. However, behind the scenes, a storm was brewing. The fame, the expectations, and the relentless scrutiny wore him down. And soon, he would make a decision that would shake Hollywood to its core. It was a comeback that no one saw coming. After years of insisting he was done, Sean Connery shocked Hollywood by stepping back into the role that made him a legend. But this time, he was in control. The frustration that had driven him away had now given him leverage. With an unprecedented deal in place, he was no longer just an actor playing Bond. He was a man reclaiming his worth. But even with the biggest paycheck of his career, one question remained. Was his heart still in it? When Connery returned for Diamonds Are Forever in 1971, there was an undeniable shift. His Bond still had the swagger, the sharp wit, and the effortless cool. But something had changed. He was older, more seasoned, and noticeably different from the younger man who had first donned the tuxedo. Some fans noticed the difference immediately. His performance was solid, but the fire, the hunger that had once defined his Bond, had dimmed. It was clear that this was a farewell, not a revival. Connery was doing the job, but his mind was already elsewhere. And he made sure this time, when he walked away, it would be for good. Despite the film's success, Connery had no interest in sticking around. He donated his entire salary from Diamonds Are Forever to the Scottish International Education Trust, a move that surprised many. But for Connery, it was about something bigger. He had grown up in poverty, struggled to make something of himself, and now he wanted to give back. He had used the Bond franchise to secure his financial future, but now he was ready to move on. And he did, leaving behind one of the most iconic performances in cinema history. The years that followed saw Connery take on a wide range of roles, proving he was more than just James Bond. From historical epics to gripping dramas, he finally had the freedom to choose projects that excited him. Films like The Man Who Would Be King and Robin and Marion showcased his depth as an actor, while The Untouchables earned him an Academy Award. He had escaped the Bond shadow, but Hollywood never truly let him go. The offers kept coming, including yet another attempt to lure him back into the 007 universe. But Connery had made up his mind. There would be no more Bond films. Yet, in a bizarre twist, he would put on the tuxedo one last time. In 1983, he returned for the unofficial Bond film Never Say Never Again, a title that playfully acknowledged his many denials about reprising the role. The film, produced outside of the official Bond franchise, was a direct challenge to the Eon Productions' stronghold on 007. Connery, now in his early 50s, proved he still had the charm, but even he admitted that the physical demands were harder this time around. While the film performed well, it was a one-time return, not a long-term comeback. Once the credits rolled, Connery was done with Bond for good. His later years in Hollywood saw him take on fewer roles, but each one was impactful. From the mentor-like figure in Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade to the wise strategist in The Hunt for Red October, he cemented himself as a legend far beyond the Bond persona. He had defied typecasting, proving he was more than just a suave spy. He was an actor of immense talent, capable of commanding the screen in any genre. But making the film was anything but easy. Eon Productions, which controlled the official Bond franchise, held trademarks on nearly everything related to 007. McClory had to navigate around a legal minefield. Spectre and Blofeld were fair game, but there could be no iconic gun barrel opening, no cue, and no signature Bond gadgets. Even as the film was being made, McClory continued fighting for more creative control over the Bond franchise, claiming he had partial ownership of the entire cinematic version of the character. The courts repeatedly rejected his claims, but he never gave up. His legal battles lasted until his death in 2006, finally ending in 2013, when his heirs sold the remaining Thunderball rights back to Eon, closing a 50-year dispute. The biggest shock of Never Say Never Again wasn't the film itself. It was the fact that Sean Connery agreed to return as James Bond. After years of saying he was finished, what changed? The answer: control. Producer Jack Schwartzman made Connery an offer that gave him everything he had ever wanted in a Bond deal. $3 million up front, equivalent to about $8 million today. A share of the profits, casting approval, script input, and most importantly, creative control. This time, Connery wouldn't just be an actor. He would have a say in how the film was made. And he made his influence count. He handpicked Klaus Maria Brandauer as Largo and Kim Basinger as Domino. He worked closely with director Irvin Kershner to shape the film's dialogue and tone. Even the title, Never Say Never Again, was an inside joke suggested by Connery's wife, Micheline. Her way of reminding him that no matter how many times he claimed he was done with Bond, the role always had a way of pulling him back in. But Connery knew this would be the last time. At 52, he played a more seasoned, world-weary Bond, a stark contrast to Roger Moore's more playful, charming take on the character in Octopussy, which was released the same year. The result? A box office win, Never Say Never Again, grossed over $160 million worldwide, proving Connery's Bond could still draw massive audiences. Behind the scenes, however, it was chaos. Schwartzman, despite his legal experience, was inexperienced as a producer. Without a firm guiding hand, the production suffered delays, budget issues, and creative disagreements. The script was a mess. Lorenzo Semple Jr., known for Flash Gordon, was the original writer, but left due to conflicts. British writers Dick Clement and Ian La Frenais were brought in, but every line of dialogue had to be checked by lawyers to avoid lawsuits from Eon Productions. The constant revisions slowed everything down. Budget concerns loomed over the film, especially with its elaborate underwater sequences, a signature of Thunderball. The action scenes faced multiple reshoots after it was discovered that Connery's body double looked noticeably younger than him. Frustration built behind the scenes, and Connery, who had always been vocal about his expectations, struggled with the disorganization. What should have been a triumphant return felt like a never-ending series of obstacles. By the time filming wrapped, Connery knew this was truly the last time he would ever play Bond. But Connery's career after Bond would prove he was more than just a secret agent in a tuxedo. In 1987, he delivered one of the most acclaimed performances of his career as Jimmy Malone in The Untouchables. The film, directed by Brian De Palma, followed Kevin Costner's character, federal agent Elliot Ness, as he attempted to take down Al Capone. Connery played a tough, streetwise Irish-American cop who became Ness's mentor, and his portrayal was nothing short of legendary. Audiences loved him, and critics praised him. The role earned Connery his first and only Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, cementing his status as a Hollywood icon beyond Bond. In the end, Connery's relationship with James Bond was complicated. It made him a global superstar, but it also confined him in ways he deeply resented. He fought against being typecast, walked away from the franchise at its peak, and even returned under his own terms, only to realize that some things were best left in the past. But no matter how much he tried to distance himself, the world never forgot. To this day, his name remains synonymous with 007, the spy who started it all, the legend who set the standard, and the man who, despite his frustrations, shaped one of the most iconic characters in film history. Even now, decades later, one thing is certain. When people think of James Bond, Sean Connery's legacy still looms the largest. Director Steven Spielberg once said that Connery was one of only 7 true movie stars in the world. His presence on screen was larger than life, his influence unmatched. Even now, years after his passing, his name still commands respect. That's the mark of a true legend, a man who never just played characters, but became them, leaving behind a legacy.